We are live today with Avatar Origins fan podcast. Welcome in, welcome in. So, today is a special episode of our podcast because we've got the great, the one and only Yay Time, aka Dave Roman. Yay Time is an author, a cartoonist, a comic book artist, a weaver of worlds and tales who's had his hand with the Atla universe through novels, and he was a former editor at Nickelodeon. So we want to give you a nice, warm welcome
Oh, thanks for
into.
having me.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here.
I love it.
Welcome, Dave. Welcome.
Oh, thank
Yay! Any words before we start the chat? Yay time.
no, I'm just excited to have a place to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. I think that's why we like created this in the first place because like honestly, we would get together talk about Avatar all the time
Totally.
and we're like imagine if we could just do this and have this big like discussion about the show. We just love it so much. So
Yeah,
that's why we're here. That's why this has been created and you know like that's what we're here for. Not here for any clout. We're not here for anything crazy. We just want to talk about the show.
exactly.
Anyway, speaking about this show, the Netflix live action series, we're going to be talking today about episode 5. Now, in this episode, it's called Spirited Away. Nice little play on Miyazaki's film, which I love. And it's a journey of Aang and Katara and Sokka in the spirit world. And so I think there was a lot of interesting changes that were made in this episode. We meet some very key and interesting characters for the first time, both expected and kind of unexpected for this show if you've watched the animated series. So, let's touch on this topic real quick. But in the beginning of this episode, we get a little bit more about Azula. We learn a bit more about her motivations and her relationship with Fire Lord Ozai. She's talking to, Fire Lord Ozai, trying to get him to say, oh, it was Zhao who found the Avatar. Isn't he so good? When, Fire Lord Ozai addresses that it's Zuko, and Azula's not happy about that. I'm going to throw this to you, Yay Time. What are your thoughts about this beginning of this episode? What are your thoughts about how the Netflix live action has evolved to this point? What are your thoughts on Azula as we see her in the scene?
It's complicated, as I'm sure it is for everybody. Um, I mean, I'll say real quick that the Spirited Away thing. I was like, oh, I like it, even though I feel like it was a little bit more Princess Mononoke vibes in the story, especially the cartoon episodes that this episode is mostly pulling from. But I feel like I don't know if you guys felt this way that I feel like by this episode, it was starting to get easier to accept that this was different, and that because the changes started to become a little bit more elaborate, and they started mixing things up way more than they had in the past. So it was a little bit easier to detach myself from the cartoon and say, okay, they're trying to do something different here.
Yeah.
And I feel like when they did, that's when they're at their strongest versus when they're trying a little too hard to be close to the cartoon and it's a little like, oh, I'm comparing it perhaps a little unfairly. Um, but I mean, tall Earthbender, you and I, like we've talked about this. Like I love certain things about the show quite a lot. I think they did a lot of things really beautifully. I think the cast is great, especially. But as a fan of animation, I think something is a little lost in the translation. There's a lot of times where I kind of miss I feel like every episode of the cartoon always has at least one 5 minute sequence where the music kicks in and it's like and you're like pumped and you're just like like they're bouncing off trees or they're fighting or there's some of the most amazing animation you've ever seen. Whereas the TV show doesn't really have that. Like I think they're kind of leaning more into maybe emotional reveals and sort of the journeys, I guess, what that they're going on emotionally seems to be like where the punches, I guess, are supposed to be coming from. But I miss all the cool action and the fun that the cartoon has. But you were asking about Azula. Azula, sorry. Yeah, Azula. Yeah, like don't you guys feel like the like in the cartoon they make such a big deal about emphasizing that everything always came easy to Azula. Like that's one of the things that Zuko says. He's like, everything always came easy for her. I've always had it hard. Whereas in this episode, we very specifically see Azula working very hard and really struggling and having lots of anxiety and feeling insecure about, whether or not her father, to get her father's approval. So that to me signaled that this is a whole different Azula. Like this is not the Azula that we know from the show.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to, okay, treat her a little bit differently because now we're meant to really feel sorry for her in a way that I don't feel like that reveal. Like we don't start to really feel sorry for Azula till pretty late into her run of the show,
Original run.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you guys feel about that?
It was a weird way to go, considering that we the only time we got to see Azula in the animated series is just that one time when what episode was it? The storm.
Mm-hmm.
And
The
we were
flashback.
in the and you're hearing what happened when Aang left the Southern Temple versus what happened when Zuko got scarred for life, right? And then we saw that brief cameo appearance by Azula enjoying that really bad moment when Zuko got smacked, right? Like here she is, she's like in the crowd, she's like
Yeah, she's
right,
a little sadistic.
right next to Zhao, who's also like, and then you got Iroh looking like, right? It's just, I mean, completely different compared to how she was introduced to this one because she was meant to be a very mysterious character up until her reveal in the start of season 2 in the animation. So how we do this,
And her father as well, right? Like I
her
feel like both
father as
of them
well,
were.
right? He was basically like the Wilson in Home Improvement, covered in the
Just under the fence.
yeah, right behind the fence, right? And up until this is what you look like now. Oh, this is how she is, right? But yeah, like you said, it's a different take on how she's being portrayed. So, not saying that's a bad thing, not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that's an interesting thing. We'll just wait and see how season 2 and 3 will push forward with her, right?
Yeah,
So.
I think I agree. I just want to mention to the audience, I think we lost a tall earthbender. So hopefully he's coming back soon, but he should be back shortly. But I really like that point that you mentioned with Azula being somebody that is we're kind of expected in the way that they set it up to have some kind of sympathy for her.
Mhm.
And like you said, we don't get that sympathy for her until basically all the way to the end, where for folks who have known the animated series, this is a spoiler alert, but she loses all her friends because she's continuously operating around inciting fear and having control over the situation. She's seeming to have control. Like you can see she's making that attempt, but then it almost fails and backfires. So she gets angry and takes it out in a different way than what we're expecting her to see. So yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like you said, Avatar Rico, and it's been mentioned. I'm curious to see how she develops over time. Especially, we only get glimpses of Mai and Ty Lee. Also, they're kind of very stoic. They're just kind of like, that was bad.
They're just support. Yeah, they're just the friends that are. Like,
They're just the friends. They're like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and they're just sticking around, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have thought we would see Tylee off doing her at least Tylee not watching, but doing some gymnastics in the background,
Right.
because she was a circus performer, right? And then or have May just throwing daggers at a target.
These are two very talented people
Yeah.
that are just kind of sitting as accessories right now. I mean, to be fair, in the animated series, the Ty Lee and Mai, along with other people we see in this episode, don't actually appear until season 2.
Sure.
So it's like, is it a kind of just an attempt at fan service just in case we don't get a season 2 of the live action?
As I mentioned last week,
Yeah.
that's what I felt it was. Just like when you saw you saw the singing nomads way too early in but okay, we need a creative way to explain the Cave of Two Lovers, and you use them, right? I'm like, okay, great, but it just felt way too soon. But like I said, like you mentioned just now, Momo, that it was one of those things where I felt, okay, I don't know if we're gonna get a second season. I don't know if we're gonna get, let alone a third season. So let's just cram as much as we could for fan service, but also try to tell the story to those who never got invested in the animated show to
Right.
begin with, right? So that was the thing. That was my take on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it, there's more on that later. I have there's another example in here, a key example that I'm sure a lot of people here are probably waiting for us to touch on. But I just want to touch on June next. You know, as you watch the series, we see June. Now, I personally think that June was excellently casted. The CGI on her animal was phenomenal, I think. I think it just lined up very well with my expectations of her. I love the banter between her and Iroh.
I like that she already got a crush on him already.
She is the Boba Fett of the Avatar universe, and I think they did an excellent job. You know, yay time. I'm just going to continue passing this to you because I want to know your thoughts. I want to know your.
I don't have a lot of thought. I agree that I think she's one of the. She's not in a lot, but she's perfect. I mean, there's some people like as just as a fan of the show, you just sort of create this vision of like, oh, if this was translated to live action, and it to me it felt like, yeah, they did it. Like it just feels her attitude was really great. Like, you know, he just exudes the confidence and the sort of like you said, Boba Fett, kind of like bad, you know, like, are they good? Are they bad? No, they're just out for themselves. And they make that like really clear. And I agree. The CGI on, I forget the name of the creature that she rides on.
Nyla.
Perfect. Like it never took me out of it for a second. And I tend to be I'm very scrutinizing with CGI integration, but it looked great. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. All right. So it looks like we have a tall earthbender here back and ready for us. Can you hear us?
Can't
I
keep
disappeared.
You did disappear for a little bit, so
yeah,
but you're back now.
Okay.
I wanted to go ahead and pass. You know, Yay Time just explained his thoughts of June to us.
Oh.
So, want to know your thoughts on June?
Well, it's nothing much to say about June because June is not really. She's a vital character, but she's not in a lot of parts of this particular episode. But as she is on camera, I really enjoyed her character. I think that she's spot on. I think that she, the actress who's portraying June, has really developed characterization. I think that her lines are very fluent and strong as an actress, and I think she pulls it off. I mean, she definitely has the look. She definitely has the outfit, the tattoos on the right arm. So, and as Dave stated before, that sometimes the Netflix group they kind of get away from the animation, but sometimes they stay true. In this case, I think they stayed true. So,
yeah,
I like her. I would like to see more of her.
Yeah.
What else I miss?
But I'll say she is another example of, as you guys brought up already, that there's a lot of things in this episode that they're pulling from other episodes, and they're sort of, you know, so like we're seeing like her role comes in a lot sooner than it did in the show, and they're using her in a slightly different way than she's, you know, like the job that she's being hired to do and all that. Like everything's like a little bit different, and yet it feels pretty seamless from my view.
Mm-hmm.
It still worked though. In a way, it still worked. You know, given the little tidbit changes that they did for June or anything in that matter. Like
I felt like there was a lot of mentions. I cannot express this enough to all the Avatar universe, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Legend of Korra fans. I cannot express this enough. Please watch the animation series. By all means, try not to compare it to the animation series. But this is my tidbit. I don't like that the fact that the new fans are missing out on all of the connections that we see. See, because we know the show so well, we see all the Easter eggs,
Yeah.
and if certain things are mentioned in the show,
Yeah.
we know we know what we're talking about. Okay, yeah, wow, I can't believe they mentioned that.
Oh,
But
like
the
okay, I can give you a couple
untrained
examples on that.
fan, right? Huh?
I can give you a couple examples of the Easter eggs that they
Yeah,
mentioned in
yeah.
that episode, like, such
Hold
as
on, let me get there. 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 So for the untrained fan, they won't see it as an excitement or whatever is verbalized in the show. For instance, in the bar, right? And I think that's maybe what Rico wants to touch on. In the bar,
that's
there's a
one of them. Yeah.
conversation between Zuko,
Bar-
Iroh, and the bartender, and he asked some character named Mookie, "Hey Mookie, did you see any waterbenders around here?" And he mentions something about canyon crawlers. Well, we know this from the Great Divide. There's mentions of the crawlers. We know this from the Great Divide. There's mentions of the pirate, and this is all happening off camera, off to the side. There's mentions
Exposition.
about pirates, and we know that's pretty much from the waterbending scroll and maybe another episode or so. Then they said that the Avatar was stopping a volcano from erupting, and that's from
The Aunt Wu episode,
the
the
Amu
fortune teller,
episode. Okay,
the fortune
see, so
teller.
it's a lot, and then Sokka meets a little girl. This is I don't know if y'all passed this, but it's
That's what I was gonna mention.
when you're talking about the little doll.
Yes,
Okay, go ahead and elaborate on that.
that's when he was like, does the doll have a name?" I was like, "Well, maybe we will give it a name. Maybe we can give it. I'm not gonna attempt the name because it's just too long. We all know
Yeah,
it
and
was
paddle
it was the
and
pseudo
paddle
name
up.
Aang gave, but it was that pseudo name that Aang gave when he tried to sneak into Omashu, right?
That's right.
And then, of course, when he introduced himself to that little girl, my name is Sokka. It rhymes with
That's Akka.
Akka, right?
Right.
I
From the
mean,
tale, that was from the Tales of Ba Sing Se.
exactly. I mean, sadly, generic fans going in fresh, they're not going to understand that. I mean, but they're probably going to be like, but when,
Or maybe they just think Sokka's just being silly.
yeah,
You know, I find it amazing that you guys are able to pick out those Easter eggs because I'm just watching this and I'm like, Mr. Papadopoulos the third. But then
The
you
third.
know, you're right.
Bonzoon.
That's him with the
Bonzoon.
hay, not the hay,
Yes.
but like Appa's hair.
yes.
What I got hung up on is he also says Sokka like Waka Waka, which is the first Muppets reference in Avatar:
Yes.
Last Airbender.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Quasi, right?
it's like they sat around at a storyboard meeting, Dave, and just said, how can we take all the pieces of this great big puzzle and slam it into these episodes without tearing up the historical pieces that's embedded into these shows, and I guess that's what they went with. I can't understand like
But they
how
know
do you vote? How do you vote on it? Yeah, let's go ahead and mention it that way. They'll never miss it. They'll never pick up on it. But
no
we always do.
the fans of the original animated series, like all of us, we would easily pick that up.
Right.
That's who they know that part of the target audience would be.
I saw some Yu Yang archers in there as well.
Yep.
So there was a lot going on. And there were some sentimental moments that I did enjoy. And we'll get into that in a few. I don't know if Momo wants to tap
Yeah,
in.
I think if you're talking about sentimental moments, we're heading into the spirit world.
Yes.
Aang, Sokka, and Katara. A little different from what we are used to in the animated series. This is that, like, as we mentioned before, this is the animated series and this is the live action. They're going in two different ways. They still tell a similar story, but it's told in different ways.
Right.
And so,
Even how the spirit world works seems
Yeah.
to be like the rules of the spirit world seem to be different in this
Yes.
than in the cartoon.
Can
Yeah.
you elaborate on that? I'd love to know.
Like I don't remember, like I would have to go back and watch to compare, but it just feels like there really was this emphasis on flashbacks, like the way when they're in the spirit world, they're kind of going back in time and sort of reliving key moments of their life. Whereas if you watch the episode where Aang goes into the spirit world the first time, with with the with the I forget the name of the episode, like with the fire, with the forest having been burnt down, and then he's sent in to
Hey, bye.
explore that.
And then he meets
Hey, bye,
Heibai.
yeah. I don't remember it being like really emphasizing on this like idea of flashbacks, right? Like this idea that they're going back into the past a lot.
No, but it reminded me of. It kind of reminded me of the time they went to the swamp
Mm,
and they had those hallucinations where Sokka saw Yue, Katara
right.
thought she saw her mom, and it turned out to be that tree trunk, right? And then Aang had that vision of some laughing little girl and a flying boar.
Mhm.
But it kind of felt like that called. It kind of felt like the callback on that part there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so it's like they're mashing in so many different things
While
into this
choosing a
one
bit.
episode, right? Because like even bringing in Ko, which I really want to talk about a lot, but for a second, like that's like they use him in a totally different context. He comes in a lot sooner. They're it's like in a way it's actually very convoluted, so I do wonder how people kind of follow it all, because I had to watch it like 3 times to kind of make sense of the way it works. Because it's like, okay, so the forest gets burnt and that angers the spirit of the forest, but then there's also this fog. There's like they say it's like the fog of lost souls or something. So like in a way those feel like to me like separate things, like the angered forest spirits from the fire versus this like fog of memories and despair and stuff like that. Because like Aang's like running from one thing, and then he like once he gets past the fog, like everything's like, oh, now it's like happy again, and you just have to like stay out of the fog, and as long as you're away from the fog, like nothing bad will happen to you. And
That's
that was definitely made up for the show, I think.
That and meeting Gyatso.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think I found very sentimental. But like if you compare it to the animated series, he in the live action, they intentionally go to a spot and say we're going into the spirit world,
Right.
and then they mistakenly get in there with him, and they're like, oh no. But in the animated series, it's an accident.
Mhm.
Like it all happens by mistake. He even comes back. He's like, "Hey, Katara, what's up?" And she doesn't see him.
Which I love that scene.
Yeah. He's like, they're just living life, and he's kind of like, "Hey, hey, hey," until he realizes that he's in a completely different dimension, and there's nobody there except for Roku's spirit animal, the dragon, to kind of help him understand like where he is and things like that. So I found that to be very different. Like I loved that scene where he's just like, "Hey, Katara, what's going on?" And then he's like,
We're having that ghost moment. Yeah.
Yeah, the other scene that they lose, that's one of my all-time favorite moments from the first season, is when Roku's dragon flies over
Yes.
Iroh.
"Yeah."
And Iroh, and that's the first time we notice that Iroh sees things from the spirit world.
Yes.
And it's like such a subtle but perfect little moment that's like,
Yeah.
I love that
something's going on
scene.
here.
Love that scene, Dave.
Mhm.
Love that scene. That makes it made the audience realize like it's something special about this man.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We knew he was the Dragon of the West, but the minute he saw that, then he was like, "Oh, nothing."
Mhm.
like he saw it. Like I remember yelling that out
Yep.
when I first saw it. He just, whoa,
Yeah.
that's deep. That is deep. That
I
man
know.
is, he's enlightened. He's
Does
enlightened.
that mean he's just like? Does that mean Janora is just like him too? I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but yeah, I thought about that just now. Right? But yeah. Anyways, let's get back to the topic.
I'm like, that's we got to go back to Korra, my friend.
Yeah.
But it's so yeah. Like I think it's really interesting to see the contrast here. We also, speaking of contrast and kind of the condensing and the fan service, we see Wang Xitong, the owl from the
Yeah.
library.
That's my boy.
And season 2, and so he, if I were to put my color on it, he remains omnipresent. I think they tried to throw in a little bit of humor there, where he's talking to Aang, and then all Katara and Sokka hear, hoo, 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 hoo.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of funny, a little slightly contrasting. And I think that's where the
Mhm.
humor comes from because he's very big, omnipresent.
Yes.
You know, if you know the animated series, you know he is
Yeah.
kind of like he's not. He ends up becoming like a bit of a villain towards the end. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like humorous to see him being like, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
um,
Like the
but
fact that Aang's the only one that can understand him, but the other two can't. Yeah. It's
so yay time. I'm just gonna just throw this up to you. Thoughts on
I
Yay
I
time?
don't have a lot of strong feelings about that one. I was like, okay, they just like it is what it is. Like they were seeing him sooner. I didn't want to think too hard about it. I have a little bit more questions about the fox spirit, but we can save that.
The
You know,
knowledge seeker. Was that the knowledge seeker? Wasn't it the
it
knowledge
kind of
seeker?
remind. Yeah, was that what they were trying to pull off from being the fox who was
From the
going to the
library.
going up the library? I mean,
oh.
I don't think it was. That was not the first thing I thought of, but the fact that okay, if a fox can talk to Sokka, but an owl, but an owl, but Sokka cannot understand what Wang Shi Tong is saying. What's going on here? You know, and
Maybe Washington's on a different level than the knowledge seeker.
Mm, right, right.
maybe
And I assumed that was the knowledge seeker because they had Washington in the same episode.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
So
right. I thought I was like, wait a second, and then okay, this is a completely different character altogether now. When now that we're now that we're somewhat deviating from animation to live. So yeah, I just that later on in that reveal when it was a kind of a disappointment for me. I'm not gonna lie.
You
Hmm.
mean like when episodes down the line?
Yeah, it it was a disappointment for me. I'm not gonna lie on that one.
What are your thoughts on the Fox Yay time?
I think it was confusing. Like I just think I don't want to say the spoiler because I don't know how people are watching this or not, but similarly, I was like, when you find out kind of who the Fox Spirit is, I think it just puts a lot on that character. Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
like this character now represents a lot of different things in
Hmm.
both worlds, and I was just kind of like, okay, like I just have to think on it. And again, it's hard. I take a little empathy for people who haven't watched the cartoon. Maybe to them it's all cool, you know. I have to like I know how we feel. Like, we're all a little like, it should be more like a cartoon. But yeah, I don't have super strong feelings about.
Yeah.
well, I didn't I don't really have any feedback about the Fox. Maybe I just love everything tall. You guys know how I feel about Kyoshi.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw Washington standing in its towering presence, I was slightly moved by that. I was like, well, wow, we know how he was in the show and in the animation, and out appears this large spirit creature, and I love the voice. Whoever the actor is voicing that character, the voice for me was kind of spot on.
I
You
didn't
know,
check the cast if that was the same voice actor that that did Wang Chitong in the animation to the one in this
right?
one.
He,
I
he
didn't get a chance to check the
well,
cast.
he kind of sounds like
Kind
the
of
same.
sounds
I
like
mean,
him.
it may not be. I don't know, but Washington was kind of out of place. We used to see him in the library, but then again, he wasn't out of place because he was in the spirit world.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed that little moment. I thought it was kind of clever that the humans could not understand what Washington was saying. That
Mm.
that just goes to show you how the strength and spirituality between the Avatar, the spirit world, and Washington was all happening. So
Well,
that little piece that they put in there, although it was out of place, I felt like they pulled that off. So I'm
it was
saying,
more like this is how the avatar is towards the spirits compared to the
Mm-hmm.
regular non-spirits
mhm.
humans, right? So because like we all said, this is their other clever way for the avatar to be the bridge between worlds, right? So that was another clue in to say, yeah, The Avatar is the bridge between the two worlds. No one else. So, to your point, I like that kind of concept there.
Yeah, I think like I agree with everything that has been said. I do pick up on that discrepancy where the fox is able to talk to Sokka, but like, and I don't know. It almost thinks makes me think like, was Wan Tong intentional about making sure that the humans could not hear? He could very well have that power. Um, it could be that the fox is basically half human, so it could be that relationship there is a little bit less distant. But we don't know that
Can
until
I
later on.
can I throw in another theory?
Yeah.
A little bit of I mean, we'll talk about Gyatso, but Gyatso makes a big speech about time and about how time is a funny thing and how the past and the future can all sort of bleed. And I think that's sort of one of the things that they're kind of laying in the mist and the fog is sort of like playing with time and stuff. So it could be that the fox spirit has a connection with Sokka, but it hasn't happened yet. But because they do eventually have that connection,
Yeah.
retroactively they have this connection in the spirit world because time is a funny thing in the spirit world. So time doesn't work the same way it does in the real world. That's just my nerdy side
True.
theory.
Wow.
Very true.
That's crazy. I like that. I like that.
Seconds in real time could be hours in.
Well, and back in time, because like when we meet Gyatso, he's like in this little hut
that little
that
hut,
doesn't really exist. Like it's kind of its own thing. It's like this metaphorical airbender hut. But then he says, "Oh, look, the game that we were playing," and it's the same game, like left how it was left the last time Aang saw him. So in a way, Gyatso was supposed to. He's trying to say like, "This is me from that moment in time,"
Right.
and I'm like frozen sort of in that time right now, and you're meeting me,
I guess
Right?
this is also a play on how the fog of Lost Souls came in there too, right?
Right.
Incorporating in that.
Honestly, like moving forward to with Gyatso, I think one of the most powerful moments in that scene for me is that, from what I remember watching this series, that was the first time that somebody who has known Aang or like has some kind of importance to Aang outside of Sokka and Katara has not chastised him for his absence.
Yeah.
And you can feel that in like Aang's response to him. He was basically, I was getting in tears. I was like, finally, my boy. The whole series, everybody's like, you were gone. You left us. This is all your fault why we're in this war. And then Gyatso comes comes to Earth and he's like, hey, well, not Earth, but the spirit world. And he's like, hey, even if you were there, if you did not disappear, you wouldn't have been able to do anything. It's not your fault. Don't worry. And I was kind of like,
it was something that Aang needed to hear, that things happen for it was one of those things happen for a reason, right? And you're still here. That's basically how I felt that it was. And it was like him stuck in that, like Ye Time said, it was like he was stuck in that bit and he needed to get out. This is his way of getting out of that box, so he can be up free in the heavens or the nirvana. He can be a clean slate now.
yeah.
I felt like that was how Gyatso was for that scene alone, right? To tell Aang,
when he says specifically, like he's like, I was on a path, like all the airbenders who died, we had this sort of choice, and most of them chose to move on to the next plane of existence, but I felt I had to stay because I specifically had to talk to you, or I specifically so it's like he was sticking around just for that for that lesson, for that final message, and that's the perfect airbender message, which is to let go, right, and to just be free, to just I loved it.
Sticking by the ways of the air nomads, detaching themselves from that. So for Gyatso to, in a way, Gyatso in that sense was still attached to Aang. In order for him to let go, for Aang to move on, he had to tell him that, so he can go, and then Aang can go on to continue his journey. So that's what I also took from that too. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Momo.
Yeah, I want to move forward a little bit. And I think this one's the elephant or the face stealer in the room, Ko.
Mm, loved it.
So I will
I want to
say,
hear what Dave got to say.
yeah.
If you were about to ask, Dave mentioned something about Cole. I have something I would like to say about Cole, but Dave, if you please.
Sure. Uh, for me, there was it like Ko, like how you feel about certain things. Like that's how I feel about Ko. Like for me, when I first watched the show, I remember that episode when, like, to me, it was like, wow, this is next level stuff. Like they're really, that was the scariest scene. It was deep. It was mysterious. It was foreboding, and then it ends with like, "Oh, I'll see you again." You know, like it was like, "Whoa, no!" You know, like there's such great storytelling in that sequence.
Mm.
So it's a tall order to try to recreate that. I get it, and I have a little bit of compassion for the writers and the
That was
TV
good.
producers. You know, like, did they pull it off? Okay, maybe a little bit. Like certain things, like I think they got the creepiness down for sure.
Yes.
I thought George Takei. I didn't realize it was George Takei doing the
Oh
voice.
gosh, I always wanted him. I wanted to hear Ko say, "Oh my."
Yeah, well, there were no signature Takaiisms, so it was very easy to not realize it was him. Like he was great, but I think what's really missing, and this is one of the things that like I got hung up on, is that one of the reasons why Ko is so cool in the cartoon is because they warn Aang in advance. They say, Aang, if you're gonna talk to Ko, you can't show emotion or expression
Yeah,
because he will steal your face.
yeah,
Right.
And for Aang, who everything up until that point that we know about Aang is he's all about expression. He's this hyper funny, making funny faces, silly kid. And now you're like, but you can't show any emotion. And that's the test for you, like you know, to survive this. And they skipped over all that. There's none of that tension. He just Ko just kind of shows up as a monster, and he's definitely a scary monster, but
Okay.
it doesn't have that like, can you survive this test by, you know, getting through this thing? And one of the things that my other sad part that I thought that was missed is the way they set up the monkey at first, because before they go into Ko's cave in the cartoon,
mm,
he sees a monkey, and then the monkey turns and it has no face. And it's like, oh, and so that's right off the bat, we've established the stakes now. It's like, that's what he means when he said he'll steal your face. That's what he's talking about. Look at that monkey without a face. That's the creepiest thing I've ever seen. And then when Ko's talking, at one point, he pulls off the monkey face, and it's like, oh, that was the monkey outside. Like, you know, like
yeah.
it all connects, and it really pays off everything it's setting up. In the in the TV show, the live action show, they're both TV shows. The live action, they show you the monkey face, but it doesn't have any context. There's no reason, like there's no establishing what it is, and it's not really clear. Like they eventually call him, that's Ko the face stealer, but it's after the fact, and you don't fully know what you're dealing with. So therefore, you don't even know fully what to be afraid of outside of it's a scary monster.
Wow.
I see.
I got a quick question. I got a
That's
quick question. So listen. Okay, so in the show, y'all help me remember this. Did they did not tell Aang, they did not warn him, be careful, don't show any emotions?
In this
That
car,
never
in the
happened.
live action
It
show, they
never
don't.
happened in live
not in
action.
the live action.
No, he doesn't know that.
See, and that's a vital part that
Yeah.
the audience is not going to understand. Why is Aang talking like he's dead? Because he was like, why did I
Yeah.
try to?
No,
You
and
know,
in fact,
Nobody
they-
warned them about
And that's
the
why I
try
always
not
say
to laugh.
watch the live
thing.
action. I mean, watch the animated series, watch the animated series. But let me say this real quick. I hear what you're saying, Dave. I agree with you when you said they pulled off the creepiness. I mean,
oh yeah,
the sound effects of his 50 feet or whatever, however many crusty toes that he has on his body. I felt like Cole was pretty creepy, especially right before the scene transition when he does this really fast close up and
Yes.
then it moves on to another scene, then comes back. I like the background. I got a bad habit of when I'm watching this show, something I love so much, I start peeling it back onions. I'm watching in layers, you
Mm.
know. So I'm checking out the backdrop. I'm checking out the wardrobe. I'm checking out facial expressions. I'm checking out camera angles. I'm checking out everything. And if it doesn't connect, I got to remind myself, well, you can't judge every TV series, every film that way. But for this particular show, it is very difficult for me to just watch it with one lens. I have multiple lenses when I watch the show. So I felt like they pulled off Cole. Um, However, I do agree with the missing baboon moment. Like they should, I wish that
Mm.
body was shown so they can know how crazy and creepy this creature is, this spiritual creature.
Yep.
So I agree with you on that. But I enjoyed the way they animated that character or CGI that character, whatever terminology you want to use. So that's
Yeah,
my
like I'll just finish. I just want to say, like, I agree 100%. Like, it was creepy. Like, so again, if you've never seen the show, you don't know what it's supposed to be. Does it work on its own? Absolutely. Like, I think if someone's just watching this thing cold, you're right. The way he
Mhm.
speeds up, all that stuff is super creepy. But I think for me, even that part where he suddenly speeds up into the camera, what is he doing? Like, what is he actually doing in those moments? Like, because it kind of looks like he's just going in for a kiss. Like, I don't know, or he's gonna eat them. Like it's like,
a really fast kiss, huh?
like, whoa, like boundaries. Because he's not stealing their faces.
He's keeping him in storage.
He's just keeping them right. So at that point, he's really just a big caterpillar.
Yeah.
Right. He's
That part-
cocooning them, and then
A
he's gonna
big
eat them
centipede.
later. But he's not using their faces for anything, and that to me is the whole point. Because like when he meets Ko in the cartoon, he's like, "Oh, I haven't had a child's face for a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exciting. I'm gonna get a kid face if I get this one." I was just gonna say, because you guys mentioned something about the differences. Like Ko specifically says, because I wrote it down, someone who can resist. So in the cartoon, it's someone who can go in without emotion, but in the TV show, it's someone who can resist the flashbacks because he's providing the flashbacks into their memories.
Yes.
So Aang sees the air temple, and he's like, the air temple, and he gets excited for a second, and then he goes, it's not real. It's not real. It's not real. And that's when Ko comes out and he's like, someone who can resist my illusion. So that's kind of like, I feel like they reinvented Ko as like a whole new kind of creature because it's more about seduction through your
Temptation.
memories
Yep.
and your trauma, more so than like the face stealing thing. So he kind of didn't need to be a face stealer. He could have just been like creepy caterpillar monster of memory or something.
But there's also that connection prior to Ko that when he saw the air temple again,
Mhm.
and then you realize it's not real. It's not real. We
Right.
also have to remind ourselves that in that show, live action show that is, that he was already at the Southern Air Temple where it was
Right.
already in ruins. So for him to see it again nice and clean, you'd be like, no, that's not real.
Yeah,
So we have to remember that he established that connection and already acknowledged that.
true.
Hence the resistance from Ko.
Yeah, which to me just lowers the stakes. Like I just you don't feel as much of a threat.
No, I feel like it almost makes it seem like it's a different take on emotion. You know, we see the very traumatic death of Katara and Sokka's mother through the lens of Katara. That was
Dark.
hard. Yeah, it was dark.
That was dark.
And kind of, follows.
Can I just
yeah,
because from a writer standpoint, it's so dark, it's so powerful that they should have had Sokka's flashback first because it's like, oh my god, Katara's trauma is dark, and then it's like, and now let's see Sokka, and he's like, oh, his dad was a little disappointed with him. Like, there was a scale here of like,
was it an attempt to kind of like lighten the mood? I mean,
or lighten the mood,
like because like and they they don't really showcase things like this dark in the animated series, so it's like it was okay. I'm gonna kind of go off a little bit of how I felt. They hide into the hut, and Katara tries her best to waterbend to defend her mother, and you're kind of like, no, don't do it. It's like the person who opens the door where there's
Yeah.
something kind of
Yes.
monster back there,
Like
and
the fairy movie cliche. Yeah.
right. But it's like you're kind of in this mind space that you're watching her trying to do something in the situation, and it backfires to the point that it cost her mom. And like, not you can kind of feel for Katara in the sense that it's not only that she just watched her mom get burned alive, but it wouldn't be far-fetched for her to think that it was her fault.
Right.
And so that's heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you try to remind yourself, like, okay, maybe it wouldn't be her fault, but like when you're walking in the fog of lost souls and you get put into that situation where she sees her mom again, like it's hard to not have emotion and fall into that path of like reliving that memory again. I guess it just weighs so heavily emotionally on Katara and Sokka that they're able to immerse themselves into the experiences of their past. Whereas for Aang, because he has that like additional step of the connection he has with the spirit world, and it's just kind of that air in general, he's able to kind of discern that and detach himself a little bit better. I don't know. That was just
I thought it was so powerful. My only wish was that they had more time to kind of then lean into this idea that maybe because of that traumatic event and because she blames herself, because the time I waterbended, that's got my mom killed, that could somehow be maybe how she's repressing her power somehow, and that there could have been some needing to kind of forgive herself in the way that Gyatso says, Aang, you should let go and forgive yourself. If Aang could have said something like that to Katara to help her let go of her grief, then that could have been the thing that made her suddenly become a more like better waterbender. But I feel like they just didn't have time for that. So
I wanted to say one thing about what Dave was talking. We were talking about Cole. You know how you said he was coming in for a kiss. I think I know exactly where they got that particular scene from. That scene came from, I believe, it was Siege of the North, or one or two, where Cole is in there, and thank you. Cole is giving like hints of what he's talking about, and then Aang goes, "The koi fish."
And he comes in because
he comes in real fast. Is it?
Yes.
He's like, I must be going now. Whatever he says.
Right.
I think
but that's what I'm saying. It has a reason in the cartoon. In the TV show, it doesn't have a reason. In the live action, they don't put any reason for it. It's just like a cool little horror movie trick.
I mean, the only hint that we got in the live action with Ko is you took something from me, right? And okay, that was it. That was the different. Now
and it gets resolved pretty easily in the next episode. Like
yes,
it's like I think it takes like 5 minutes for him to get the little trinket, and then it's like,
thanks, bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Right. Dave, what did you like? Did you like how they created? I'm going to say Dark Heibai in his other form. Did you like that?
I did actually. I thought that's one of those, like, there's certain things in cartoons you're like, I don't know if you can like how that would look in live action, but I thought that looked great.
Yeah, that looked really good. I really enjoyed the all the artwork that went into that, and special effects that went into that character. You see Heibai growling as if he's this panda bear / monster with all the slob and everything else. So it looks authentic. It looks believable. It looks scary. So I think they pulled that part off. So
I like how
we all have what we like about the show and what we don't like about the show. But overall, y'all, and because it's Avatar, I think we're enjoying it, and we also enjoying pulling back the curtains, to dissect it, if you will. It's not a bad job.
No.
It just needs some tweaking. So hopefully, in seasons 2 and 3, they go back to the basics. They go back to the storyboard. They go back to the research. They listen to the fans. They listen to the writers of past and come ready for season 2 and season 3.
Yeah, I think the CGI in this episode overall was just on point. June's pet, even like Katara's mom getting set on fire,
Issue.
like hey bye, Ko, all well done, all detailed. It adds every detail adds to the effects that they are trying to prevent. Even like when June's like animal gets snatches that guy,
Yeah.
like
Tongue whip. Yeah.
it's all well done. And so, kind of, when we talked about this before, towards the end of the episode, Aang realizes he has to go see Roku. And so he heads off to Roku. And we'll talk about that next week because it sounds like there's some differences there. And so, kind of wrapping this episode up, yay time, I have a big question for you. And, I hope it's appropriate to ask, but if you were to write this episode, what changes would you make? Or like, how would you write it?
I really admire the writers on this because I don't think it's an easy challenge. I think anytime you're taking something that people love so much and then say, oh, let's do another version of it,
Right.
and like and logistically they have to make changes. Like there's certain stuff that we sit there and we're like, why did you? There's certain changes they have to make because it's not a cartoon. There's just some stuff that, as much as I love it, I know that it would never work in the TV show. And you have to show people a little new stuff too. I do think that's part of the game is like you give the fans some of what we know, but we have to see a few new things along the way to kind of keep us interested as well. So I think for the most part, they do a really good job. I wouldn't even try to tackle. Like, I mean, to me, it's like, I mean, some of you guys know I did work on a adaptation and, and that was a hard challenge. And so I have nothing but love and admiration for anybody who tackles something like that. And like you guys were saying, like, I think more of it is working than not. I think the love is there. I think anything that they change it knowing why they're changing it. And like you said, sometimes like the funny nickname that Sokka says to the girl, like, okay, we cut that joke from the Amashu episode, but we didn't forget it. We see you, like, so they're keeping everybody in mind, which I respect. They didn't have to do all that. We know what it looks like when someone just makes, like even the line of like, oh, it's Sokka, like Akka, like, you could read that as a diss to the previous adaptation where they changed the names, and it wasn't Sokka, it was Sokka, So to me, like, the whole thing is a love letter to the show. So I really do respect it. And then I can enjoy being a nerd on the side and saying, okay, so Aang's just going to take his glider and fly to the Fire Nation.
I was just gonna.
How far away is the Fire Nation? Like a couple blocks?
Well said. Well
But
said.
also but also it made sense for Aang to tell Appa and Momo, you're not coming because
he's protecting them.
Big giant flying bison. Who's riding on that over the Fire Nation?
Yeah.
Pretty obvious, right?
Right. And then within the context of the TV show, especially, it becomes even more like seeing a flying bison would stand out even more than it does in a cartoon.
Yeah. Especially flying over enemy territory, whereas with Aang, he's little. That's a little more discreet than a big giant bison, right?
Right.
So
the pros and the cons, right? Then like what we lose though is this sense that this world is large in scale and scope, right? Like in the show, they in the cartoon they make, I think they say like 3 or 4 times, like, oh, it's a long distance to get there. It's going to take us a while. We got to get going before we run out of time. And it's just kind of like that classic TV show thing where suddenly it's like, everything's next door, everything's real close. It's no big deal.
I mean, in the animated series, didn't he take the dragon there to visit there in the first place?
The first time, yeah.
The first time.
He goes there as a ghost or a spirit, and then he goes for real the second time.
Yeah, it's just like whenever that person needs a taxi, it's right there. There's always one available, no matter what. It's that same thing. I even thought that as well. Like, all right, I'm gonna go see you, and then he's flying right in, and even he's passing over enemy lines. Nobody's gonna look at him being like,
nobody sees them.
What's that?
Well, also he needs somebody to watch out for spiritless Sokka and Katara as well, right? which is also a callback to that episode, to the episode in the animated series
storm.
when he had to go search for frogs, so
Mhm.
in order to cure their sickness, where instead of them getting sick, suck on these. It's I gotta get their spirits back in their bodies, right? So
Yeah, it's clever. It's
it was
clever.
clever there, yeah.
And Dave, I just want to let you know that from me, from all of us, that it was indeed a honor and a pleasure bringing back all these old memories, talking about Avatar with you. It's always a pleasure doing that with you. We've been doing it for forever. And thank you. I know how busy, we know how busy your schedule is. So thank you so much tremendously for taking the opportunity to discuss Avatar with us. And we hope to have you back here again. in the
Anytime,
near
man.
future.
No, it's a genuine treat, and I love what you guys are doing, and keep on keeping the fun times going.
Yeah, my cheers with my Esca water. Yeah.
I love that.
More,
Thank you.
you want
Like,
to
this is my first time like officially meeting you, but this
Same here.
discussion was a blast. Like,
Same here.
this is what again, this is really why this podcast was created. It was just because we are all big fans of the series. We love watching the series, and we just wanted we want to talk about it. And we were just
It
like,
hits us a lot different, so we need someone to talk to.
yeah, it really does, because you just really go deep, and you can just, I mean, we're kind of time boxing ourselves to an hour here, but like, left to our own devices, we could just continue this conversation for hours and hours on end. And so, this was really great. Yay time. This was awesome to chat with you and hear your thoughts, because I think your thoughts were so deep, valuable, great, insightful. I was snapping all day long. To the fans that are watching this, thank you for joining. Again, we don't do this for clout. We just do this because we love Avatar.
Right.
If you're ever interested, feel free to shoot us a DM, chat. If you ever want to come and be a part of this, just like A Time, like, this is a fan podcast by the fans for the fans, and so we're just here to chat. So if you liked what you saw, like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. Feel free to join us next week as we talk about episode 6, continuation of this.
Ah.
Yeah. All right. So, this concludes the podcast for today. Again, thank you. Yay time. Avatar. Hey, Avatar.
No, Dave looking like, what are they doing?
Avatar.
We got this little silly thing, Dave. When we leave, we say Avatar Origins out.
Avatar Origins out. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Avatar Origins out. Thanks, everyone. You guys have a wonderful